You are listening to Radio Alamundi.
Hi there, wherever you are. I'm Marco Rixecker, a freelance writer, reporter, producer, teacher, translator, tour guide, poet, singer, and songwriter. I speak several languages, and I'm the creator and founder of Radio Alamundi, an evolving podcast station where no language and all languages are spoken. It's a multilingual mix of music, poetry, lectures, languages, interviews, documentaries, recipes, and a lot more, co-produced with the students of the Alamundi International Cultural Center. You can find us on radioalamundi.bandcamp.com, podcasts.apple.com, Spotify, YouTube, Breaker, Player FM, Facebook, search Radio Alamundi. The following narrative includes excerpts from a collection of testimonies and interviews entitled Let's Talk About It Anywhere in the World, where it is all about people's voices, accents, and speech patterns, hand in hand with my own personal anecdotes and observations. In addition to that, people are free to introduce themselves and speak their minds openly in their respective, often indigenous, languages and dialects, without any paraphrases or expectations. So, let the story go on from there. Jonathan Scott is a singer-songwriter and musician based in Chicago. He is a founding member of two Chicago bands, Cinco de Gatos and the Doleful Lions. I hear some musical clips played by the latter in the background of a podcast about Chicago, which I've subscribed to. I find them pretty cool, which then motivates me to do some research until I find a contact page allowing me to reach out and ask for an online interview. That's how Jonathan Scott and I connect for the first time. A few email exchanges allow us to set up a date and time for an online conversation that starts at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time and lasts quite a bit into the evening. One of the reasons why the interview is so long is that in the process, I notice how much I've missed talking with musicians. In addition to that, Jonathan and I really hit it off from the start.
My name is Jonathan Scott. I am guitar player, songwriter of the band Doleful Lions, and I also play guitar and sing in a band called Cinco de Gatos. It is 5:05 p.m. Central Standard Time, and I am in Chicago, Illinois, USA.
Right after the usual introductions, my conversation with Jonathan Scott focuses on names, not just his, but also those of his two musical projects. Where do the names come from?
Well, Cinco de Gatos was the band that I was in the band and project I was in prior to Doleful Lions. So this would have been from 93 we formed until about early 96. And then when we broke up, I started the Doleful Lions. Cinco de Gatos came from, we were sitting in a Mexican restaurant in Logan Square, and sometime after practice in 1993, we lived in a loft right off of Albany in Fullerton. I was living with the drummer of a band called Screeching Weasel at the time, and he was playing drums in Cinco de Gatos at the time. So we were all sitting there. He had a really hard time because he was always touring. They had just gotten signed to a label called Lookout Records, which was Green Day's label at the time. So he was super busy, always touring. So we were lucky to have him. And so he's like, I got a band name. I got the perfect band name. And we said, great, what? He said, Cinco de Gatos. And we were like, okay, that sounded good to me. I guess it was a play off of a Cinco de Mayo, So it stuck. The thing that's weird though, is when I came up with Doleful Lions, I wasn't thinking about there's a cat theme to everything I've done. So, and there is, and I don't know why that is. I guess that Doleful Lions was somehow connected, obviously, to Cinco de Gatos, but Doleful Lions, the name came from, I had been making these cassettes just on 4-track of like, I had a Casio keyboard and I had a guitar and a Dr. Rhythm drum machine, an MV. I think it was not an MV. I can't remember now, but it was called Dr. Rhythm. I'm sure I'll remember this later, but and I would program beats and then, make up little songs over that. And that became Doleful Lions. And the name came from, I used to sit on the floor and with the 4-track, and I would look straight ahead when I was playing, and my records were there. And there was this Tones on Tail record that always used to sit there. And one of the songs was called Lions. So I think that's what I eventually just came up with, I probably, oh yeah, Lions, I'll call it Lions, Doleful Lions. So, yeah, the names it's weird to think about. I hadn't thought about that they're both cats. I don't know why I hadn't actually thought about that until right now either. Maybe it's psychological or something.
So what's your favorite animal like?
Oh yeah, it's definitely a cat for sure. No, I'm a dog person. No, my favorite animal. Yeah, I guess it would be a cat. So it's not such a mystery, I guess, as to why. But it's not something I've thought about too much either. Domesticated animals, I have a dog and a cat here. So, and they get along fairly well. So I love animals of all kinds, I don't discriminate. So I don't have a favorite, I guess. So I won't say cat.
Chicago appears as an omnipresence off and on throughout our discussion, which goes as far as exploring new ideas together, such as making a movie based on some of Jonathan's songs, for example. Which part of you is Chicago?
I would say probably, as far as my musical self is concerned, it's a certain part of Chicago that comes from, the clubs, and when we would play at places like Lounge Acts in the 90s and things. So there's this sort of undercurrent that goes all through that. When I first came to the city, it was in 1987, 1988. And I came from the suburbs, and we would come see punk rock bands. That was what motivated me and my friends and I, that were all skateboarders out in the suburbs, to come to the city. And at the time, the city was a different sort of entity. So there's an undercurrent of that in all of my music from the first album until now. And definitely in my other band, Cinco de Gatos, that is, I think if you know Chicago, you hear it in the lyrics, sometimes even in the music itself, the approach. I say this all the time. Chicago is well known for blues. It's well known for soul, which it should be. It's an amazing history, but the history didn't end in 1980. So many things have happened since, and I feel fortunate that I was a part, at least tangentially, a part of a scene that blossomed into something that became bigger than you could ever, that I ever would have imagined. So, and that is an undercurrent in my music for sure, that I hear constantly. If I'm not writing about it overtly, it's definitely there.
What's going on in Chicago right now?
It's a different sort of environment than what I'm used to. As worldwide, it's probably a very different environment that people are used to. And it's been, trying to get acclimated to what has been going on in the past couple of years. For example, Cinco de Gatos, which is the band I'm playing with. So the way Doleful Lions works is that that's sort of my project. I play everything. all the parts are me, everything is me. I make the records here, right, in this area. And so that's all kind of a self-contained thing. Cinco de Gatos is a band with 3 other members. So we rehearse every week and we play live. And we reformed with a couple of newer members, including my brother, back in late 2019. So we had started rehearsing and everything. And then, of course, the world sort of changed and we weren't able to play live. And so we continued to rehearse and play on our own, and come up with a demo and play. And I was doing Doleful Lions stuff at the time too. I had recorded I think 2 or 3 albums in that time period. So I was firing on all cylinders. But Chicago was a ghost town for probably a year. And I don't think even the downtown area is fully the same. It's actually really, really sad. I was working at a job when the first lockdown happened in March in the South Loop. So I would commute from where I'm at in Lincoln Square now to the South Loop every day and take Lakeshore Drive. And it literally looked like Dawn of the Dead. It's like the streets were empty. The city was empty, and there's a profound sadness that I felt, and people that are locals here felt, that I still feel, and that's what I think I feel still about what's going on. It's very sad. It doesn't feel the same, the city itself, and I love Chicago. I love Chicago. I say it every day. It's like it's my favorite place. I don't ever see myself leaving here. I always say, oh, if I could go to the Bahamas, I would, or if I could go to Florida, but I don't go, because I love this place, so, but it does feel different. And I think it's influenced my music for sure. The being shut in, the being, isolated from people. I'm so happy to have Cinco de Gatos where I can go and talk to people every week and see them. But the Doleful Lions side of my musical persona, or whatever, if you want to call it, is really isolated and feels really, and I think it reflects on my new record and some of my later stuff that I've done.
What do you do to stay in the loop?
Well, I mean, you have like the social media aspect, which has been really helpful. And I think that's how people commune now. Back in the old days, it was word of mouth. Like, the scene that I was in at the time, it was really small, and it grew and grew and grew. But at that time, it was word of like, hey, there's going to be this show. Your friend's band is playing, and then they become like a bigger band, and then they are talking to all these different people, so all these other people, and then you have this huge scene. That's how scenes start and happen, So back then, that was how you would figure these things out. Now it's like you find out through Facebook. I mean, you go and look, and everybody, you have all your friends, it's your scene, and your flyer is the silly little thing you put on Facebook, I guess, that says that you're playing on this such and such date, you should come, and here's a video. I mean, it's better than it was, because back in the day it was a flyer on a post that you would put up illegally and hope you didn't get caught. And you didn't know if anybody even cared or saw it. And now it's like a bunch of people might see it. So there's no excuse for not coming to see us play. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think, hey, I think it's great. I know that people are just like, oh, I don't like this and that. I totally understand that, but think about that. I mean, you never would have heard my music, most likely. I mean, that's one of the things that's so amazing about this outreach that we have through this medium, is that, like, I hear sometimes I'll see on some playlist it got played in Singapore or something weird. Like, they never would have heard me, before any of this was taking place. So for us to be able to talk, for you to be able to hear that, what was it on a podcast as background music? I mean, that wouldn't have taken place, normally, and that's invaluable to a musician. I mean, they can say whatever they want about the good old days and touring and all that stuff. This is much easier. And I guess it does affect the music in some way. I think that has some of that has changed as a result of how we distribute music now and how we reach people. And I do think that the music is different now as a result. But I I really do think that it's nice to be able to have the reach that I have. And I'm I'm definitely not popular. I'm, as the reader said, underground, like way under. Like you won't, like they had to look for me. I think in that article they said that Jonathan shouldn't put out so many albums and maybe let this lie for a little while and let people discover it on their own. But which I probably should do. But yeah, I wouldn't even be able to reach that kind of a limited audience, with what I do. So I'm thankful for it.
If you could choose one of your songs that as a story would make it to the movies, which would it be?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I think, okay, I have a song that's on an album that I put out in 2016. I have to think of the title. I have so many songs. And it's called Depression Teen Wolf and the Treasure of the Four Crows. That's a very cinematic title, right? The first part of that song, it's on an album from 2016. I'm so bad with the titles of my albums, but it was an album from 2016. It was called, I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, so that song would be a great movie, because the first line of the song was, when I was awake, I saw a boy in Plano kick a raven down the street. I'm sure he didn't know that every crow is born with a buried treasure in his heart. So that's the first stanza. So that comes from something I actually saw take place. I used to live in a place called Plano, Illinois. I was driving down the street and there was this kid and he was walking this way and he was kicking something. I thought it was a ball, but it was a dead bird. It was a raven. So I was like, oh, I got to write a song. That's the weirdest. That's like a David Lynch thing. It's like the weirdest thing I had ever seen. So I went home and wrote that first line. So the movie would be, he was Depression Teen Wolf, in my song. And the Treasure of the Four Crows is when he discovers that, dead things on the side of the road sometimes are, have value. So that would be the movie. It would be this coming of age movie where he discovers there's value in these things that he didn't think had value. That would be a really good movie, man. Somebody should definitely have me make that, I think. Right. Depression Teen Wolf is a reoccurring character in a couple of my songs. So, I mean, there's another song I have called, and this is also Chicago centric song. The song is called Depression Teen Wolf Will Have His Revenge on Glendale Heights. That song is about depression, which it kind of is me. I guess it's, it's kind of I'm using Depression Teen Wolf as kind of a, I'm writing through him, I guess, a little bit, that song is about, I guess it's the title self-explanatory. That would be the sequel. The first one is Depression Teen Wolf and the Treasure of the Four Crows. And then the second one that comes out the next year, total blockbuster. First one's blockbuster, obviously. Second one next year, Depression Teen Wolf and Will Have His Revenge on Glendale Heights. And that would be like a comedy. The first one is more of a coming of age movie. So maybe a drama. So, and maybe like kind of a teen drama with kind of supernatural elements. A lot of my songs have supernatural elements, so there'd be like a UFO part in it. There would probably be a part where there is going to be a part. I'm actually thinking about doing this now, where Depression Teen Wolf has this ability to like time travel. It's just a part of the movie. So he goes back in time. He becomes kind of like, there's a whole side story where he becomes a Conan the Barbarian type situation where he's like in that era, like the Hyperborean age. So he would do that. That would be also something that he does. And then he comes back. So that's more of a coming of age, sidetrack, sword and sandal type adventure movie, fantasy movie. But the second one's straight up comedy. Playing it for the laughs, making fun of it. You know how like Scream, you remember when the movie Scream comes out, that's like making fun of the horror movies. It would be like us making fun of the first movie and the people who thought it was good.
Inevitably, food and haunts, both Jonathan, Scott, and I can relate to, also come up in our talk. And there always seems to be a story attached that is so Chicago, as Jonathan puts it at some point. What's your favorite hangout like?
My favorite hangout in the city, let me think. I mean, they don't really exist very much anymore. Okay, you know where I do love to go. And it's not changed. It's still the same as the Metro. I don't know if you're familiar. You've lived in Chicago. So it's right on the north side on North Clark, 3730 North Clark. It used to be called the Cabaret Metro back when I was a kid. So this would have been like the first time I went there. I think I saw Sonic Youth. It would have been like 1988. Oh my God. I was like 14, 15 years old. I was in the big bad city somewhere. I didn't know where I was. That show is actually documented on a bootleg that became a Sonic Youth record. It's actually on their website. It's called Hold That Tiger. I was at that show. That was the first show that I ever saw at the Metro. And then after that, I saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers. This was something I was telling my friend the other night. I saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers there, and it was John Frusciante's like second show. So it was like he had only been playing with them for like a week. So this was late 88 or so. So I saw that there. So my point is that place is so legendary, and it had already been around by that point by 10 years. Like the Clash played there, and a bunch of bands had played there. And it's been a constant in my life for 35 years. 35 years I've been going to see bands play there. I saw Naked Raygun play there like 10 times. I could just rattle off the bands that I saw that were just transformational bands, both local and non-local bands. And that is an unchanging thing. You walk in there right now and it's back open again. You walk in there now, it's exactly the same. Nothing has changed. There was a moment, I was telling my girlfriend about this, and this is a great moment, and this is so Chicago, because it was one of those things that happened that you didn't even think was a big deal until after the fact. So my friend and I went to go see Naked Raygun play at the Metro. This would have been in 1988. So it would have been in like the summer of 88, maybe. And they were great, and it was awesome. And so we're standing there in the front near the end of the show, and there's this guy standing next to me that looks exactly like Axl Rose. Exactly. Like you're like, oh my God, this guy's trying so hard to look exactly like Axl Rose. It's like, it's funny because he's like scowling, and he looked exactly like he does in the video of like, Welcome to the Jungle. He had the do-rag. It was purple. Everything was exactly the same. So I go and walk towards the stairs, towards this guy, and he's like looking at everybody, and he's doing that. It's fucking Axl Rose. It's really him. And that's Chicago. That's a Chicago story. It's really Axl Rose. And it turns out that Guns N' Roses were rehearsing right above in the rehearsal space, right above the stage. And I had read some article years later in the Reader, Chicago Reader, about how they were kind of camped out in the summer of 88 here in Chicago and were rehearsing at the Metro. So I was literally standing next to Axl Rose at the height of like when they were the biggest band in the world, like in the summer of 88. And that was a totally Chicago thing. It was totally normal. And they never even thought twice about it. We walked out like, oh my God, that was Axl Rose. And he's like, yeah, whatever. It's Chicago.
What's the last thing people should see in Chicago right before they leave?
Oh, the last thing. I think that they should go to a baseball game at Wrigley Field. You know, I have not been to the new or the more recent Chicago iteration of their stadium. I hear it's nice. But Wrigley Field is sort of a constant. I mean, it's been there for forever. I would always tell people to do that if you can. I mean, it's baseball season goes from April to October. So in the winter months, you know what's nice? I've never done it. No. Here's what I would tell you. There are these little around November, December, these little markets these Kris Kringle markets or something, and they're over next to Daily Plaza, and they still do them. And they've been there forever. So you can go there and you can get kind of like, it's very Christmassy and holiday, you know, knickknacks and all that stuff. I would tell them to do that if there's no baseball game. That, I think you got like both sides covered, like about like you almost got the whole year covered, you know.
A specific topic Jonathan Scott and I focus on is sound, whether it's the sound of his music or the sounds around him in Chicago. And then there's the listener's perspective, how they experience the music. What is the coolest sound you've heard recently, and how could you play it on an instrument?
What's the coolest sound? I live next to a hospital, like about this is a good answer. This is a good answer to your question. I live about a block from a hospital on the north side of Chicago, and down the main road you'll have obviously you have a lot of ambulance traffic, so you'll hear ambulances all the time. It's become sort of second nature, you know. It's not like I hear it very much, but every once in a while there's an ambulance that has slowed down or something, like, and the siren starts to fade or it's not going, it's going, and it does this like over the course of maybe like a minute or two. And then sometimes it'll like hiccup and go, it does this. And it did this one night, like it was probably like at 11:30, 12 o'clock. And it was really loud. And I thought, that's the coolest sound. Like that sounds like some drone shit I would be listening to, or like late at night on my headphones, you know. And I said, it's perfect. And it was like, there was a lot of reverb because it was coming down the street. It was coming down, you know, in between the buildings. It was perfect. Chicago's that way. And, you know, living in the city, you'll have like these moments that are, that sort of speak to you on a musical level, which is what's nice about living in a place like this. And that's why I think music sounds different in different regions, you know. Like obviously if you grew up in Wyoming, you're going to play acoustic guitar differently than I am. I mean, to me, I think that seems fairly self-evident, you know. Or if you live in Indonesia, if you grew up in Indonesia and you learned how to play guitar in Indonesia, you're going to play your guitar differently than me. If you've ever heard those Indonesian guitar records, those gamelan records and stuff, I mean, it's truly amazing how they approach the instrument over the way Westerners approach it. It's, you know, it's like a totally different concept. One of the things I always really liked are when you would hear records from like maybe Eastern Bloc. I've gotten really into like old Soviet like new romantics type music from the 80s. There's a lot of this on Spotify. And there's this band that I've really gotten into, and to hear their interpretation of probably music they couldn't easily get, you know, because you think about it, it's in the Soviet Union, it's in the 80s. They're not getting Yaz records. They're not getting anything really, right? So their idea of what that music sounded like is so interesting, you know. I don't know what the question was. Oh, about the sound. Yeah, the sound. The sound was the ambulance sound, the slow ambulance. This like ambulance that's slowing down. I have a super fuzz pedal, so I would plug that into my guitar, and then I would go out into maybe a delay. So I wouldn't put too much on it, but I would put like some fuzz pedal on there, and then I would get a slide, like a guitar slide, and I would start on the A string, maybe about at the octave, and I would turn the gain way up. I would plug it into an amplifier. I would turn the gain all the way to 10, and then I would cut the high to about 50. leave the mid to about 75. And this is just off the top of my head. I'm sure I would tweak this. And I would leave the bass like pretty high. And then plug it into the amp. I would turn it on, crank it, and then start on the octave. And I could either I could do the you play guitar? You know, like you do the you do the harmonics at the octave, right? Ding! You could do that. And then you could and then fret it, and then you could like start to do that and then start to come down the fretboard. That would be some way to do it.
Actually, if you could learn a new musical instrument, which would it be?
Yeah, it would be the drums, without a doubt. I've always wanted to play drums. I say this to our drummer every week that we rehearse. I'm like, man, I wish I had played drums. I still want to. I still would like to learn, and I don't know how to play. It's the one instrument I can't just pick up and play. I don't know. To me, like, you can have a bad band with a good drummer, and they'll be a good band. But you can also have a good band, or you can have a great band with a bad drummer, and you're never going to be that great. I think that's true in rock music, and like the kind of music that I play and the music that I like. Drummers always save the day. And if you have a good drummer, you as a guitar player or a singer or a bass player or a keyboard can mess up all day long. And if you're playing live, it definitely sounds like it's part of the situation. Like the drummer that I play with, his name's Jerry in Cinco de Gatos. He's one of those drummers. We are not the tightest band on the planet by any means. And so he's really good and really like right there. And he just cleans it all up all the time. So I think, yeah, I would play drums.
How practical is your music?
It's not practical. No, I think here's what I'll say. If we're using the term practical in the way, do you mean practical how? Like how would you practical as far as like applying it to your life?
What good is it? Like that?
Yes. Okay. I think it's practical in the sense that that I think all of my music is resonates with a certain sort of person. This is what I've always found out, like, or I've always discovered, like, and the Doleful Lions part of it is, I think, very good at least through the years, I've always been proud of my ability to kind of stir kind of emotion, you know, like, and maybe not always have it be like this linear thing, like, oh, this song is about this guy and he lost his girl and it's a sad song. So, you know, my songs haven't really ever been that way. They've been like, this song is about, I don't know, a Balinese temple. And I have a song about a Balinese temple on one of my albums. And to me, the practicality of being able to write a song that can convey an emotion of longing and sadness and nostalgia for maybe something you never even actually experienced. Maybe you just went there one time or you saw a photo of it. My ability to translate all of that into an emotion that you didn't experience, but you feel when you listen to it. That's very practical. I think that is an intangibly practical thing. Now, whether or not I'm successful at that all the time, I don't know. But that particular song, that's why I pointed out, because I think that was the one time where I felt like I did it really well, you know, because I just listened to it recently. It came on some mix on my Spotify thing. I was like, oh yeah, this was a moment where like that I wanted to convey something that I felt, because I went to Bali in 2001 and was there for like 4 months. It was gorgeous, you know, and I was inspired to write a song by this Balinese temple that I visited. And I came home, I didn't have a guitar there, but I came home and I wrote the song and we recorded it. It was on one of our albums and it's called Tana Lat. I mean, I know I'm going off on a tangent. You asked about the practicality. I'm going to defend my music to you and the practicality of it. So the practicality in it would be that is the ability to convey an emotion to someone, and that they can feel that. That's what art does. I think that's what good art does. I mean, whether or not it's the sadness or be anger or, you know, rage or happiness or whatever that emotion is, I think that's what successful art does. I think that's what good art does, is that it makes you feel something. Like if I go and look at, I don't know, you know, painting or something at the Art Institute, you know, it makes me feel a certain way, like a Rembrandt or something like that. Those always make me feel a certain way. It's that faded nostalgia of something I never experienced. It's like you're living there, you know, you're in it. That's something that you can't. That's practical.
Jonathan Scott's open-mindedness as a Chicago musician becomes clear when I suddenly steer our conversation off topic and, in the midst of a discussion about making music, ask him sort of a more trivial question. Which household item would you put in a museum for future generations to remember?
I would definitely put the toaster. I hate toasters. I never want to see another one. Anything that's toasted is not as good. So toaster. Final answer.
Songwriting can be sort of a long and convoluted process involving instruments such as the guitar and lyrics that are to be matched with sounds and melodies. And one of the inspiring moments is when I realized that Jonathan Scott harmoniously combines old and new, technology and vintage, which translates into the use of the latest apps on his smartphone to make music that will eventually end up as a mini EP on vinyl. What are you working on right now?
I just put out a mini LP. You know, back in the old days, they had the LPs. So I guess they do that again now. But this is 6 songs. So that came out 2 weeks ago. That's called New Slushies. And then the new record that will be out in probably, I call them records. I mean, they're on, you know what I mean, on Bandcamp, whatever. That's called 17 Heartthrobs. And that'll be out in probably a couple weeks. And that'll have 6 songs. That's almost finished. The Doleful Lions is always a steady stream of my song. Because I write all the time, like all day. I have things that it's a constant thing with that, which I'm so thankful for. I mean, that's why I'm never going to stop doing it, I don't think, unless, you know, they don't come. But the Cinco de Gatos is cool because it's more of a band. So there's like interaction. You have to let things ruminate. You have to practice. And so it moves at a slower pace, but it's a lot more deliberate than the Doleful Lions part of what I do. And we just put out a record, a 7-inch. I think I have it here. And it's called Driving on Red Line, and it's on red vinyl, and it's $7. And if you want to get a copy, I guess you can get in contact with me through you, I guess, or if it works that way. And it's red, which is cool. And these are good songs. This is Cinco de Gatos. So we just did that. So yeah, I love, you know, even through everything and through all the changes in the world, and through whatever, I'm still doing a lot of stuff.
What is your favorite tool?
When I'm making music? I would say it used to be the guitar, but now it's not. Now it's the recording tool itself. So I record everything on my iPad. And the program that they use is called GarageBand. And from what I hear, it's a real simple program. Everybody's like, oh yeah, that just comes standard on your phone or whatever. But it's totally changed the way that I do music in such a way. It like totally changed the sound of the band, you know? So to me, that's the most important tool that I use, like by far. And it used to be my voice and the guitar. But you can, I mean, the producer or the studio itself is an instrument. And for what I do, it's the I guess the most important instrument, because you can always make, you know, something sound like a guitar. I mean, for better or worse. Not that I would necessarily recommend doing that all the time, but, you know, you can sample something, or you can do something that, you know, that makes it sound like something new or something different. But to be able to use an iPad that, you know, has Bandcamp or GarageBand on it, which is from what I hear, you know, like I said, just a standard app on your iPhone, and to be able to, like, for me, totally make these studio sounding records when I'm not in a studio, when I'm just sitting on my couch over here and not playing real drums, but it sounds, you know, it totally sounds like it to me, you know. And you know, I've been in the studio. I know what I would think I know what a drum sounds like, you know. So yeah, that's my favorite tool.
How can you create something out of nothing?
I don't know. It's the great mystery of I think of being a songwriter, because I don't know where that spark necessarily comes from. I know the process. Like, I could tell you the process of what I do, which is fairly standard and is the same most of the time. Except now in the age of GarageBand, it's a little different. But up to when I had GarageBand GarageBand, excuse me, it was this. I would have an acoustic guitar at my sofa, or in my living room, or in my bedroom. I would play it all day long, because I would situate my life in such a way where I didn't have to go to a job, or if I could go to a job, maybe at night or a few hours, you know. And the rest of the time, I had totally shut myself off from all social interactions with most people, and I would just play guitar all day. And I would sing over the guitar playing and the chord changes, and I would come up with things that I thought sounded great. And so I would sing something like maybe a repetitive phrase or something, and then I would hear something. Oh, I would always have a little recorder with me, like just a little like Radio Shack thing. Like, you're talking like early 90s, right? Like one of those like things, like you would probably know what I meant, but you can look it up. So I would always have that going, and I would play this, you know, like, oh, that sounds cool. And I would sing something over it. Oh, that sounds great. And then, like, and this is maybe the divine part, or the part I can't explain. Something would happen at that point or soon after that took it somewhere else, where then it started to become a song. So it would maybe be a phrase, a word, maybe a change, a chord change, something where, like, I heard it, and then it was just like, and then it all started to like come together. And I've described it this way, and I've described it this way to one other person. No one else has ever asked me this, but it's like putting a puzzle together. And you have, like, you may have a framework or you may not, but you have 2 or 3 pieces that are fitting here. So, and then you can see, and it's like, sort of like, oh yeah, these fit here, but I'll put this here. And then eventually it starts to fill in. And once it starts to fill in on like the edges, which I would call the framework of the song, everything becomes much easier. And then it starts to guide you down some way. I've had songs where I've written them lyrically, and then gone, I have no idea what that means. If someone ever asked me what the song meant, I wouldn't be able to know what to tell them. And then years later go, oh my God, I know what I was going through at that time of my life. It does totally coincide with all this stuff. So there's a spiritual aspect, or to me, a magical aspect, or a divine aspect to it that I can't explain. But the mechanics of it was always guitar and singing and repetitive phrases and recording them and putting parts together. Now with GarageBand, it's recording full orchestrated parts, like where I'm playing all these different things. And that's what New Slushies is that it's different for me, because these are just kind of like more feels, maybe in more of a, you know, in a non-linear sort of way. But I do like the way it came out. It's a little different for me, but that's more of the process now.
How can you and your music save the world?
I think that the vibe that I try to convey in the Doleful Lions, in the music that I do, is a good sort of chill, take it easy. Things are okay. Everyone is connected in some way. We all have these experiences. It's difficult. I'm definitely not like trying to say that that I'm like a John Lennon type maybe could change the world. I'm definitely not that. But there's a chill vibe to my music that is so, I think when you put it on and just realize that we're all connected. I love you. I hope that the music conveys that there's a love in that music that I hope brings people together. I'm a music person, so I mean it's easy for me to be swayed by that, and like that, you know, the commonality that we all have that eventually will bring us all together, and that we'll all sort of chill out and stop with the crazy stuff that's been going on, you know, is this commonality through something like art, through music. I mean, that's where I feel it is every time I put something on and I'm like, this is humanity. This is what I'm listening to. And that to me, like that's some spiritual thing that has never not been that way for me. Like the first time I ever heard my parents' record collection when I was 4 years old, right? They had like Beatles, Creedence, and that spoke to me on such a profound level, even at that age, that and that feeling has never gone out of me. It's always been just as strong as it was then. And I figured like, if I have this connection to this, other people have connections to things too that are like this, you know? So that's the commonality. It may not be music. It could be whatever passion you have. If you have a passion for reading comic books, or if you have a passion for, I don't know, going to the park or something, but this is like the commonality that we all have. And that's how I think my music could save the world. I don't know if it could save the world, but it could definitely help you find a way to save yourself. And if once everybody does that, then the world's saved. Because we all have this sort of, this commonality. And I hope that my music can convey that in some way.
My interview with Jonathan Scott also explores bits and pieces of his biographical background before we move on back to Chicago and the way he experiences the city as a musician. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh, in 5 years? That's a really good question. I think I definitely will still be doing music. I mean, for sure, because that has never stopped. I mean, once I picked up a guitar and started playing, that's been pretty constant. Like I put out, so I could see myself still playing music. I don't know if I would be in Chicago in 5 years. I mean, but maybe. Like I've always said, oh, I'm leaving. You know, I don't think I want to stay or whatever. But I never do. So I could be here. I would still love to be doing Cinco de Gatos. That's so much fun because it's like live music. That band is more like heavy and more punk rock. So that's fun to play and it's loud. So I want to be doing that. Definitely. That's totally fun. And doing Cinco de Gatos, that's more quiet, introverted type stuff. But that's me too. So I'll be doing that. I would like to figure out how to like do something where I don't have to go to work. You know what I mean? Like go to a job. Maybe by that point I'll have figured that out. I'm still working on that part.
What was your favorite children's song or nursery rhyme?
Oh my gosh, my favorite children's song or nursery rhyme. Okay, so I don't know. This doesn't quite fit, but it's close. I was just talking about this too. There was this book that my dad used to read me when I was like probably two or three. It was a Tom and Jerry book, the cartoon. And there was this page in the book that I would always have my dad reread over and over again, like 30 times, because it would always like drove me crazy. It was so funny. And it was thieves, stop them. So if I had to say it, if push comes to shove, my favorite nursery rhyme or children's song, I'm going to say it's got to be the Tom and Jerry book, even though that doesn't quite fit what you're asking, but it's close. It's close, I guess. I can hear the chorus on this Cinco de Gatos song. Actually, I may actually use that. But I think I'd have to like give credit to whoever wrote that book, that Tom and Jerry book.
If we can say I have the blues, in your opinion, why can't we say I have the punk?
Yeah, I thought you were gonna ask that. I don't know why you can't. It's definitely an emotion. It's a feeling for sure. I have such respect for like Howling Wolf and Muddy Waters and the guys who were like on Maxwell Street. I love that music, and I've definitely gotten into it over the past few years, and I just think it's unbelievable. And as I said, I don't know why you can't, because the things that you feel like when you play that kind of music, or the emotion that you're trying to convey to the listener, is every bit as real as, you know, Sweet Home Chicago, which is a sad song. You know, when you listen to it, you know, it's people play it as a celebratory song now, but the lyrics are sad. You know, it's Robert Johnson, right? I mean, like that's like amazing stuff. But I don't know why you can't say I got the, you know, I'm so angry at everything. I don't know where to turn. I feel like that there's nothing that can get me out of this. And that's a certain emotion that you can convey in music that's punk rock for sure. What Doleful Lions and what I do with that is different. I mean, it's more like I got the blues for sure. I got the blues, but in a different context, you know, in more of a more synthesizer and Smiths and Echo and the Bunnymen sort of way. But those blues are very real too. I don't know why you can't say that, but I think that you should be able to. And I think that there are certain groups of people in the world who appreciate, you know, the kind of music that I like, that maybe you like, that is not necessarily Chicago blues, that conveys an emotion that has just as much validity, you know.
Another thing Jonathan Scott and I have in common is our love of poetry, especially that of Carl Sandburg, famous for his Chicago poems, published at the beginning of the 20th century. And so I make sure to give Jonathan one of Carl Sandburg's poems entitled Harmonica Humdrums to do a reading performance of by the end of our conversation.
My name is Jonathan Scott. I'm the guitar player, singer-songwriter of Doleful Lions and Cinco de Gatos. And I am going to read a poem by Carl Sandburg called Harmonica Humdrums. And so the days pass, and so we drift and dawdle. Bright stood the mountains, brighter loomed the sea, and so the nights go, and so we flash and fade. Green lay the hills, greener a river evening. Stones wore gray lichen, and trees a morn mist. And so the gold be gone, and so the harm be ashes. First moved the moonrise, later dropped the moon down. Handy shoved the dawn, handy dandy shone the sun.
Had you been familiar with that poem before?
No, but I love Carl Sandburg. I didn't know that poem though. One of the first things I ever put to music when I was learning how to play guitar was a poem called Letter S by Carl Sandburg, which I love that. I still love that poem so much. And I remembered that when you said Carl Sandburg, I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool, because that was one of the first things I ever put to music was a Carl Sandburg poem.
So, how can Jonathan Scott and I not come to the conclusion to continue the conversation in person, hopefully sharing a typical Chicago hot dog or a Chicago pizza, and keep exploring new ideas and topics? So, let the story go on from there. Let me ask you about that. What is the recipe for your favorite Chicago dish?
Okay. So I'm all about Chicago hot dogs, Chicago pizza. so we could talk about this for a while, right? You know, because there's like, you got the Chicago hot dog, which I highly recommend. Devil Dogs, which is in the South Loop. That's amazing. So that has, you got the hot dog, the bun, there's tomato. Tomato, onions, a lot of onions. And I'm not a big onion guy, but this is good. And then this is making me so hungry right now. And the pickle on top. Oh, that's awesome. As far as pizza is concerned, I think Chicago pizza, you know, that's world famous. Lou Malnati's is good. I'm going to make you very nostalgic for Chicago. Giordano's is good. Gino East downtown is great. That's amazing. Home Run Inn is kind of a dark horse. That's amazing. One of the good things about Chicago too, that I think is different than other places, is you can go to the frozen food section of the pizza aisle and get all these local frozen pizzas. So like they have the Home Run Inn, Connie's, they have all these different frozen Chicago pizza, which I think is rare. I don't know if you see that. Maybe you see that in other cities, but I don't think you do. So I would have that. We're talking about Chicago. You said Chicago food, right? Yeah, those are great. Maybe at Al's Beef. There used to be one across from Chicago Stadium, but I heard it closed. Some guy told me the other day it closed, which I didn't know. But there's one out. There's a few now. They like kind of Al's Beef. Al's Beef's great. This is making me so hungry.
What are you up to now?
Nothing. Just talking to you. And probably have dinner. And then, like I said, I'm finishing up or trying to finish up my Doleful Lions record that's probably going to be out in the next couple of weeks, called 17 Heartthrobs. I'm recording. I'll probably record tonight. I probably definitely will. And then tomorrow. What are you doing?